Today we're answering a subscriber question, because that's what we're all about what's going on with a video card for a workstation or high-end desktop. Is it better to have an A series or an RTX series, specifically an RTX 3090? So let's take a look at a couple of questions from one subscriber who just found us and down the rabbit hole and in the weeds. And this is from Jack Whistling, and this is from the video, which is better for workstations, comparing an NVIDIA RTX 30XX and an A series specs. And Jack said, "Hi, just found your channel, just subscribed. Thank you, I'm honored. Like your video, appreciate it. Very informative, thank you. Was wondering what your thoughts are on an RTX A5000 versus a 2-slot RTX 3090 blower style card. Where I live, they're both the same price." Well, as my grandmother would say, that question's as broad as it is long. Now, on the surface, I would answer that one way, but then I asked some more information, so I'm going to show you message number 2, and that got edited, and I got to show you both, because as always, you change one thing, changes everything, because it's all about resources. Take a look at this. So then I asked Jack how he was going to use it, and he said, "BuildOrBuy quite a few things, all in just one computer. I will be typically playing games, streaming using Photoshop, working on Unreal Engine, pretty cool, 4 and 5 projects, and hosting servers for different games while mining on the other 3 GPUs at the same time. The primary GPU will never be mined with, only for gaming, rendering, streaming." And I've already had 7 communicators with Jack, just telling him, because of the amount of information, this has got to be a video, otherwise it's a dissertation. And I can see some of the information I was going to show you, he's pulled some of that out. Okay, the point being, change one thing, changes everything. On the surface, we're all about rendering. We're all about content creation. So that particular video is about which is better for workstations, comparing the NVIDIA RTX 30 series and an A series specs. Okay, like I said, as broad as it is long. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, and I said to reiterate, most people will tell you to look at an RTX 3090. Let's go through some specs. Let's do some of the what ifs, and so you'll have a better understanding of what's available and where we're going with this. Now, at one point, I believe he told me he was going to use this on a TRX 40 motherboard. So let's look at that from the perspective of the machine that we've been doing all of our testing with. Now, this is the Gigabyte TRX 40 Designator motherboard, and we have 2 16-lane slots and 2 8-lane slots. Okay, what's important, and let's think about the cards, and I'm going to come back to this in just a minute, so keep this in mind. 2 16-lane slots and 2 8-lane slots. These 2 8-lane slots, this is considered a 4-slot bridge to get from the first 16-lane slot to the second 16-lane slot. And this particular video card, this is an EVGA GeForce RTX 2080 Ti that is 2 slots wide. That width is significant. That width from this slot to this slot is significant. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. So what I want to do is let's look at the RTX 3090. And there's a couple of ways to get hold of an RTX 3090. I'll have a link up. One is if you can find one of the blower styles, which is usually one of the Founders Edition. Number 2, there's an article out now that I'll put a link up to that says the 3090s going forward with the blower style cooler are going to be coming out of China. What's up with that? So be careful buying a card from China from a resource you're not sure about. I'll just say that and leave it there. But if you can get either one of these for the same price, something else I want to throw out there, we need to think about the formula from Adobe, and that's the Adobe After Effects Multi-Frame Rendering CPU Optimization Formula. First part I won't get into, second part since this is specific about video cards. CPU cores count equals video RAM. That's a good point. Let's take a look at CPUs and chipsets. Remember, your motherboard is the foundation of your computer, and your chipset is the foundation of your motherboard. So let's go look at what our CPU core count is for a TRX 40. Then we'll see what kind of RAM we need on the video card. Then we'll go from there. And I'll just cut to the chase and tell you right now, either one of those have 24 gigs of RAM. So either one of those cards right now are pretty much the same with 24 gigs. 24 core CPU, you either go above it or you go below it. So if you're looking at 48 gigs, it's still above or below. Let me show you. Let's start with this article from Tom's Hardware. The RTX 3090, forget about the 3080 because only the 3090 can be bridged. And the RTX 3090 bridge is 4 slots wide. Coming back in a limited fashion, blowers will be China exclusive. I'll have a link up. Let's take a look at an NVIDIA RTX A5000. That's where he started. Okay, we're 24 gigs and 230 watts PCI Express 4.0, dual slot, an active thermal solution, which means it has a blower style fan, and more important and more significant is the NVLink bridge, two-way, two-slot, and three-slot bridges. Okay, how is that significant? Why does that matter? Because we're talking about two different video cards. Let me show you. Based on this machine, if I were to put an A series video card in here, I'm putting in one, and it'll go in the first slot. Because the bridge to get to this slot down here, which happens to be 8 lanes, that would be considered a two-slot bridge. The way they measure those bridges is a little different, and I'll show you a picture. We'll get to it. But just remember, the RTX 3090 is a 4-slot bridge. That's it. Everybody, 4-slot bridge. But when we get to the A series, it's a 2-slot or a 3-slot. Okay, this would be 1, 2, that would be 3. But that's actually considered a 2-slot bridge. And a 3-slot bridge would put us at another card, which would be different than this configuration. My point being, we could not, and he did not ask, but I want to point this out, we could not put 2 RTX, and remember, he first started with 2, now he's gone to 4. We have 2 16-lane slots and 2 8-lane slots. If you're going to put 4 GPUs in a machine, you don't want a TRX 40 unless you don't mind only using 8 lanes. PCI Express 4.0, 16 lanes. And no, you will not saturate the bus, and no, video cards are not about PCI Express 4.0. PCI Express 4.0 is about M.2 NVMe drives. But we need to look at resource allocation and see how all this fits together, because change one thing changes everything. Bear with me, let's keep going. Okay, so we've established that we're 24 gigs, they're both on that. We've established this is 230 watts, the other is going to be about 350. We've established this is dual slot, it's a blower style, and the other one he's looking at is also dual slot. Okay, the big deal that's going to be a problem here is going to be the bridge. Another advantage with an A series card is the ability to enable virtual GPU software support. I'm not going to get into that, separate video. You can do some research, I'll have the link, but it allows you to make better use of your GPU with using their stuff online. So separate. But you got to have a license for it. And if they don't tell you how much it's costing, you can bet it's not going to be cheap. And I'll have a link up to this information about virtual GPU solutions. Now this is an older article from PC World about the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3090 Founders Edition. And again, like I said, to reiterate, 2 ways to get it. If you can get your hands on a Founders Edition, or if you get one of the new ones, it's going to come out of China. Okay, something I did not mention a while ago is the CUDA cores. This is on an RTX 3090, and this has 10,496 CUDA cores. Whereas on the A5000, you'll have 8,196 CUDA cores. So right there's a big deal. If it's all about CUDA cores, you're going to get more CUDA cores on an RTX 3090. However, on an RTX 3090, you will not have tensor cores. If tensor cores matter, you're looking at A series. Both of them have 24 gigs. I'm not going to get into the memory interface or the bus width. Both support resize bar. We've done a video on that. We'll probably be doing another one. Now, another issue you're going to get into is going to be drivers. With an RTX 3090, for the kind of work we do with rendering, we always recommend studio drivers. However, when you're looking at one of the A series cards, you're looking at workstation drivers, enterprise drivers, as AMD calls them. And that can be a big deal as far as stability goes. These are not game drivers, so you have to weigh your options, what you want to do. And he's not talking about putting 2 GPUs, which is where this started. Am I better off with one A5000 or with 2 RTX 3090s? Looking at the bridge width, but he's talking about 4 GPUs. If you're going to put in 4 GPUs, we still got to look at the CPUs, but let's keep going with this. Now this gives a dimension specific of 3-slot, and to reiterate, we're already talking about a 2-slot wide. The third way to find a 2-slot wide GPU is if you can find one of the ones, and I've seen a couple of them listed. I missed my chance in the queue, but the ones that have the cooler on the side, I've seen them on some of the RTX 3080 Ti's where they're 2 slots wide with a liquid cooler. Well, there's supposed to be some EVGA RTX 3090s, the Kingpin variety, that are supposed to be 2 slots wide because they have that cooler on the side. So that's, think of 3 ways to get a 2-slot RTX 3090. I'm just saying, that slot width is extremely crucial. Okay, here's the thing that concerns me about an RTX 3090. Yes, you get more CUDA cores, but it's going to require more processing power. 350 watts per GPU. And they suggest a system power supply of 750 watts. We haven't used a 750 watt power supply in a machine for at least 5 years. We've been using 850 watt and above. So if you put 2 of these RTX 3090s in a machine, you're going to have a more expensive, a more powerful power supply, and power, clean power is everything. You're also going to have 2 power taps for that GPU, so that's 4 power taps. Whereas if you use an A series, you got 1 power tap, which is 2 power taps if you go with 2. So it depends on how you want to go. And he's not talking 1 or 2, he's now talking about 4 GPUs. Well, let's keep on this little path and see what else we can come up with. Because again, change one thing changes everything. Now with the RTX series, we have lots of manufacturers that have cards. However, when we get to the RTX A series cards, we've got one manufacturer, and that's PNY. And I want to show you this particular card at PNY because they show a pair of these with a bridge on it. Now if you look at those 2 cards, each one takes up 2 slots. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's a 2-slot bridge. That's what they call a 2-slot bridge. If we were to put 2 RTX A series, A5000 series cards in this machine, one's in a 16-lane slot, the other's in an 8-lane slot, so we can get that bridge across there. We don't have a bridge that'll get it to here because there's nothing there. There's a little single-lane slot down there, but that's not for a GPU. So if you're going to use 2 RTX 3090s, they're going to go in these 2 slots. And they have to be 2 slots wide, or else you'll lose the slot next to it on this side as well as here. This particular card is 1 slot wide. This card is 2 slots wide. And we're right up next to the Titan Ridge Thunderbolt 3 add-in card. And that is where we put the dual adapter. But remember, the bridge for an RTX 3090 is 4 slots wide. When we first started becoming aware of this situation, we had our hands on a RTX 3080 Ti that turned out to be a little over 3 1/4 slots wide. And I was like, what's up with that? That's when we realized this was staring us in the face, and this design issue, flaw, whatever you want to call it, became very apparent about spacing, PCI Express resources, and slot and lane assignments. All that matters. So if you're going to put in 2 cards, you can do 2 RTX 3090s, but that's it. If you're going to put 4 cards on this machine, you get another problem. Something I haven't mentioned yet, all your GPUs are the same height, unless you can find a half-height video card, which means if you put 2 RTX 3090s and you bridge them, then to get to that slot underneath it, that card has to be a half-height card. Half-height card and half-height card. Okay, you cannot bridge those 2. You can bridge these 2. Now, if he says he wants to put 4 video cards in here and he's not going to bridge them, however he's going to address them, most all software, like we do for rendering, addresses 1 GPU. Some applications will recognize 2 GPUs. And our experience is like, for example, there's DaVinci Resolve, and then there's DaVinci Resolve Studio. Studio, 2 GPUs. DaVinci Resolve, the free version, 1 GPU. Now, I do a lot of my primary rendering, because you got to have a backup plan, with Vegas Pro. I've been using Vegas Pro since day one. It's kind of a love-hate thing, but it's really super easy to use. My point, 1 GPU with Vegas Pro, even with all the updates they've been through. And Vegas Pro has just now gotten to where it will render with an AMD GPU, which is a big deal. And it does 80% of the rendering, which is phenomenal. So yeah, GPUs matter. So if I were to put 4 GPUs in this machine, that ain't going to happen. Not on a TRX 40. Not if I'm going to bridge them so I can harness the power of them. Now, with the mining software, whatever it does to address them, I will say, because we're on PCI Express 4, you're not the first to want to talk about this. That's why I'm going into detail about this. Do not use riser cables. Ain't going to work. With PCI Express 4, you got to be able to slow the bus down. So because of the requirement of 4 GPUs, you're not looking at a TRX 40, and we still got CPUs to look at as we match the RAM with the CPU. But we're looking at a workstation, which gives you 7 16-lane slots, and you can do whatever you need, whether it's a workstation card like an A6000, A5000, whatever, or if you just want to do 4 RTX 3090s. Because there's another one of our subscribers who's also a client, I want to thank him for that, who wanted to install 4 RTX, I believe it was 3090s, in a workstation, and the motherboard he chose was the Gigabyte, which I agree at the time was best choice. However, another subscriber who was doing that said that ain't going to work. He went through 2 Gigabyte WRX80 motherboards and realized he could not put in 4 GPUs. It just wasn't going to work on the Gigabyte motherboard. He had to swap over to the Asus motherboard. So if you're going to put in 4 GPUs, because of the way resources are allocated, you want a workstation motherboard. So you don't want a TRX 40, you want a WRX80, but you want to use the Asus motherboard. Let's keep traveling down this path because I got some more stuff I want to share with you, and I'll have all these links in the description so you can compare and do your own research. But remember, change one thing changes everything. All these details matter. And our goal is to keep it simple and make it work. That's what we're all about. So you get an idea what the bridge looks like, you get an idea of the spacing, whatever you want to call it. That's 2 GPUs, that's 2 A5000s, and that's 1, 2, and 1, 2. And you can see how that bridges. So hold that thought. And I will also have a link up. Linus Tech Tips has a really good article about this. A question was asked on their forums, which looks a lot like the question that's been asked of us. But here where they start with one RTX A5000 or an RTX 3090. And the question posed to us was one RTX A5000 or 2 RTX 3090s. And he's got that on a 5950, which is 16 cores. Okay, 16 cores, 24 gigs. GPU exceeds what the CPU needs, but if he thinks he's going to put in 2, he can't because that's on a X570 chipset and he's only got one 16-lane slot. I'll have a link up. Now here's a nice little chart from AskGeek.io. It's got ads running all over it, so I'm not going to run through it, but I'll have the link up so you guys can check it out, where they've done a comparison where you can see apples and apples as best you can. I'm also going to have a link up on the A6000 because if you think you're going to need to put 2 RTX 3090s in a machine to get 48 gigs, well, you're better off starting with 48 gigs because you're talking one video card that's doing 300 watts versus one video card times 2 that's going to be 350 watts, which means 7 to 750 watts for those 2 GPUs. And if you're going to take it to 4, I'm just saying do the math. And the NVLink bridges that work on the A5000 are of the same design as the RTX A6000. I don't know that they're specifically the same model, but they're of the same design, meaning they're 2-slot and 3-slot bridges. And these can also take advantage of the virtual GPU licensing. I'm also going to have a link up to Vegas Pro showing what the specs are, which are pretty nominal. And that's what I love about the Adobe formula. Whether you use Adobe software or not, it is the most complete formula we've ever had for managing CPU to GPU. And this, what you want to take away from this is specific to one GPU. And I will also have a link up to the DaVinci Resolve. It says DaVinci Resolve 15 Mac Configuration Guide. There is a new guide, but this is one of the easiest to find. And it talks about for multiple GPU configurations, you should use the same model GPU for all processing GPUs. But the documentation, when you download and read that errata document, will talk more in detail about the GPU. Okay, let's take a look at a workstation motherboard, WRX80. Let's check our specs. And this doesn't show it on here, but we're talking about 7 16-lane slots. 7 16-lane slots electrically, not just mechanically. So the model specifications for the Threadripper Pro are similar with the Threadripper 3rd generation. We're looking at 64 cores, 32 cores, 16 cores, 12 cores. Okay, if we're looking at a GPU with 24 cores, then we're either 16 or 32. If we double that 24 to 48, then we're probably looking at a 64-core CPU. And there's other issues that you're dealing with if you're dealing with 64 cores to get the 8-channel, which is another detail I'll go into later. But the point of this is, think about the chipset, think about the CPU, think about the motherboard. Now, on the Gigabyte TRX 40 Designaire, which is a Threadripper 3rd generation, you're looking at 32 cores. That 3970, we think, is probably the best bang for the buck. So with 32 cores, if you're looking at 24 gigs of memory, there's not a 32 gig video card. So you either go 24, 48, or you do 24, you stay 24. But you're talking 1 video card, 2 video cards, or 4 video cards. Every one of those details matters. And I'll have a link after this. You'll have to scroll down to get to it. They don't give you a hashtag bookmark where you can go right to these CPUs. But you can compare. We're looking at 64 cores, 32 cores, 24 cores, 32, 24, and 16. And the 3970, 32 cores on the TRX 40, that's the best deal for the money, the best bang for the buck. And on the Threadripper Pro, again, 64 cores, 32 cores, 16 cores, and down to 12 cores. The point of the reference is you've got to look at the chipset when you're trying to decide Threadripper 3 TRX 40 high-end desktop versus Threadripper Pro WRX80 Workstation. It's all about PCI Express resources. It's all about the motherboard. It's all about the chipset. As long as you're referencing CPUs, you're going to have a hard time deciding. But if you'll break it down very simply and succinctly and look at motherboard PCI Express resources, it makes it real simple. 1 GPU, 2 GPUs, or 4 GPUs. If you want 4 GPUs on PCI Express 4, you want a workstation. And you want that on the Asus motherboard. Simple. And this takes us back to our video, which is better for workstations, comparing an NVIDIA RTX 30XX and A series specs. So this is kind of an update to Jack Wislin's question. And I have some more details that I'll put in the description, such as the 2 requirements on the Adobe After Effects multi-frame rendering CPU optimization formula, and also on the 4 different levels of computers that we recommend building. An entry level, which is 10 core, a secondary level, which is 16 core, like we saw in one of the descriptions about, trying to match up a card with that. Or what we're talking about is the TRX 40 high-end desktop, and then from that, the workstation. So you have to decide your resources. My recommendation to finalize this out is which is going to be better. 1 GPU, I'd go with an RTX 3090 based on the numbers. 2 GPUs, if you have the resources but you can't do anything else, as much as we have with a TRX 40, because you would not be able to use a quad card. That would be out. But that would satisfy 2 GPUs that could be bridged. But if you want to put in 4 GPUs where you have 2 and 2, then my suggestion is you've got to go with a workstation. You want to go with the WRX80 and you want to go with Asus. So I want to thank you guys for watching. This is BuildOrBuy. My name is Gil Boyd, runner of this video. Hope this helped. We're out. Stay tuned.